Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Hey, welcome friends to another Friday episode. We don't have the beautiful Michelle Rhoads in studio today. She's traveling. So we have the handsome Ken Yang joining from, are you in North Carolina home today?
I'm in North Carolina today.
Wonderful. You've got your North Carolina accent going on there a little bit.
That's right.
That's good of you. Hey, just I got a couple of things to share. We will be away for a stretch. And so we're going to, I think next week's, both episodes for next week will be reruns. So we've got some important episodes that, need to be seen again. And for anybody who missed them, so we'll have those set to broadcast in the normal time slot. But just know that we will not be joining live. Michelle and I are going to make time for a little getaway. And so we're going to see what vacationing's like. We haven't done it in a good while. So, here comes Mr. Nathan Syme too. I extended the invitation to both these gentlemen at the last minute, but didn't really know that either one of them would be able to chime in on the conversation at the last minute. So give Nathan a minute to get his AV connected. There he comes. Welcome, Nathan.
Hello. How are you doing?
Good. Glad to have you here. On the short notice, I really wasn't sure that it would work out for either of you to participate, but I'm glad you're here.
What's up,
so,
Nathan?
Are you not hearing us?
Yeah, I hear you. Sorry.
Okay, good. All right. I make sure we're good before we move ahead. So today is something I thought, with you guys being dealers yourselves, it would be good to have you here to offer your thoughts. This is something that we've talked about in the past on the podcast, probably been a couple of years ago. The only difference now is that we've got more detail, more, prepared actual booklet for dealers to be able to refer to if they wish to use this sort of calculation. So today we're talking about what I will call collection efficiency. And typically we're referring to it in collection efficiency, measuring how well we're getting money in the bank. But after a meeting with a dealer yesterday and working through these collection efficiency numbers, dealers started to ask some pointed questions about could my deficiency be caused by this? And I said, yes, it absolutely could. So we dug into it. So I think this is kind of the purpose of, drilling into this, because there's so many layers to choosing to look at collection efficiency. A lot of dealers look at delinquency. Some look at recency. We know there are dealers out there that look at collateral recovery rate. All relevant in their own ways, right? They all tell a different story. So I think our collection efficiency today, and more specifically identifying the deficiency, is part of what is meant to help dealers point to better identify the areas in their operation where there may be some, I'll call it leakage, just generally. And I don't mean people are putting money in their pocket. I just mean the money is not making it into the bank account for whatever reason. And so today we should give folks a really specific way to identify those dollars that are, not being generated. Ken, have you heard me talk about collection efficiency? You know what that is? You know what I'm referring to? That the actual.
No, I don't think I've heard that now.
Okay, so we'll get into it. Nathan, I don't recall. You do it. You've been tracking it yourself, Nathan, for quite some time. We kind of got you started on that probably a year and a half or so ago.
Probably. Yeah. Sounds about right.
So I've actually got some data teed up that we can share that's from a dealer that is, we have 2.5 years worth of weeks of data. I've got it on the screen over here on my side, but got 153 weeks of data to be able, 136 to be able to point to. And so this is really going to be important information to be able to kind of pass along for folks and get a sense for how this is different. So I'm glad you guys are here to be able to kind of add your perspective on, what's going to be presented. So let me clean up a couple formatting things. I'm trying to zoom a little bit, messed things up. Got squared away. So Nathan, I might just have you share before I dive into all that, kind of what your experience has been in tracking collection efficiency. I mean, what do you like about it? You continue to do it. So what do you find that you gain from it as a dealer?
So I think when it comes to building effective collection policies, it is a way for us to know when what changes that we're making are working, and what policies might be impacting the actual dollars we're bringing in. So, if I like to make decisions off of data, not off of guesses or hunches. So when we look and we can see that, if you're working with a customer and you have a policy when it comes to promises to pay, or working with them on we're going to make 2 payments instead of 1, and all of those kinds of things. So when you're making those decisions, you want to be able to see if it in fact is impacting your overall collections, right? So that just gives you an actionable way to ensure your collections department is doing their job, first off, and second, that the internal policies of the dealership are meeting the standards of what you should be collecting in terms of your portfolio.
Yeah, that's great. I would say the policy part is important. I think what this starts to address, and I've written articles on this over the years, and I find myself talking more about philosophy, because when you say your people are doing their job, they're doing it according to the philosophy and business approach that you want to adopt in your business, right? So this is a way to measure and confirm that the team is hitting the marks that you find relevant, which, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but essentially what's happening is, you're able to look beyond the delinquency factor and say, because otherwise we might be a little reactive, right? As dealers, we can be a little reactive and say, wow, my delinquency is sky high. We got to go, raise some hell in the collections department or whatever. And sometimes that's a little bit, first of all, it's reactive, as I said, but it's also applying pressure to the team when they very well may be doing the job that you have actually asked them to do. Right. So this is where it becomes challenging. And that's why the recency becomes a consideration here. But I think when we get into the actual process of tracking collection efficiency, then people start to, understand maybe how it's different. Let me just share on the screen here some information. This is an actual dealer's data. And I know I'm going to have to zoom in on that for you guys to be able to read any of it. But I think the most significant thing to express here is that, when you look at that report, you've got, as I said, this is live as of this past week, and what you're seeing is data from 136 weeks. So this dealer's now got 2.5 years of week over week data. So you talk about being able to identify trends and determine whether or not anything's really shifted in their practices. And I can tell you in this particular dealer's case, part of what set this conversation in motion is the collections team used to pretty consistently land in the 95% range. We've got tiers set up for them on bonuses associated with this collection efficiency outcome. And they've just been kind of falling a little bit lower. They've been falling into 93%. It's not necessarily an alert, but it is different than where they were. And so we want to try to understand what's different. Why are we collecting 93% instead of 95%? And so I've got some referred to on the screen separately. It walks you through these particular numbers, but let me just first explain what the 93% number is. So looking at this, let's look at the last 2 weeks with this particular dealer. Contractually speaking, the dealer was supposed to bring in, for those not seeing the screen, $46,981. So what I mean by contractually, Ken, is that we got to be on a software that allows us to generate a report that tells us in an upcoming 7-day period, we're used to using Monday through Sunday, but right now, if we were to run a report for next Monday through Sunday, will it tell us the payments that are contractually due in the portfolio based on the number of accounts or the accounts that are active today. Okay. So obviously if the customer's biweekly, they may or may not be due on that reporting cycle. But if they are due biweekly for $300, we would want to see them on that report, even if they've already paid it, even if they're past due from other payments. We just want to know, what does the contract say that the customer should pay in this 7-day period? And the reason that's important, it just kind of lets us as a dealer to be able to say, my portfolio is X. It's supposed to produce this much money next week. So now we come in at the close of that week and say, how much did we actually collect, right? How much did we actually put in the bank and convert to dollars? And you can see that this number right here in blue, you can see on row 7 right there, that it varies. So back to the numbers from the prior week ending the 21st, they were projected to collect 46,981. In fact, they collected 40,852 net. So there's a calculation on the other screen I'll take you to in a minute that nets out large payments. After they did that math, they came in at 87% for the week. So in any given week, we might get a little excited about that and say, man, we really collected poorly, right? And we might react accordingly. But the following week, they were projected to collect 49.7, and they collected right at 52. So 104% for that particular week. And this number that you see here is their 10-week rolling average. And that's what I recommend. That's what I recommended for you, I'm sure, Nathan, because I've been suggesting that for probably 20 years. And the reason is, I'm old. So the idea here is that you have the history, and it allows us, because of using the same methodology, it lets us know what's a reasonable target. And this 93% number that we're showing right here is a reasonable target. And I just want to pause for a minute, Ken, think about, we're in the business of financing folks with credit trouble. They haven't shown that they manage money very well in the past. I think most people who knew that was the business that we were in would be surprised to see that across 10 weeks, this buy here, pay here dealer who's financing folks with credit trouble is collecting 93% of the money that they're contractually expected to collect. Don't you think? I mean, that's just, even though this dealer is a little disappointed because they used to be at 95, 93% of the money is still a pretty good number. But I think what this begins to identify is when we talk about that deficiency, it helps us really figure out, so what are the missing dollars for that 7% in this case? So I think before I go into that, let me jump over here and show you the detail page, and I'll need to zoom in on this one as well. But so what happens over here is you can see down here in this section at row 13, this is where we subtract the large payment. So this is where we're deducting unexpected payments, is what I call them. Customers, Ken, back to our example, customers contractually due for $300 in a biweekly reporting cycle, but they have an accident, there's an insurance claim, and there's a check comes in for $6,500. Well, it's a payment, it's on our payment report, but we don't want to include it in our collection efficiency, because the whole aim of collection efficiency is to see how well are we doing collecting the payments that we expected to collect, right? And so that's why we filter that out. And so you end up with this net collection efficiency number. I know dealers who track collection efficiency, but a lot of them do it on a gross basis. And so they're running 100% plus. And so I think it's more useful to take a moment to deduct those large payments. And now you end up then with that net number.
So Jim,
go ahead.
Jim, I got a couple questions.
Sure.
So the first one is, so for those that may not understand, why the 10-week rolling average? Why not 8-week or 12 weeks?
I'm glad you brought that up. It's because when you think about across a 2-month period, you're going to have customers who pay bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly. Some of them might get a little behind, some might pay a little bit ahead. But across a 10-week period, you're pretty much going to capture almost all cycles of bi-weeklies and semi-monthlies and monthlies, right? I mean, that's kind of how we landed on that years ago and just kind of stayed there. And so it just makes sure that we capture a broad enough range so that if there is a monthly customer who's past due and they need a month to catch up, then it should still reflect. So in the example that I've given in the past is if you take it to a customer who's got a weekly payment that's due, then all of this, and when you think about this, you start to identify the reason that this number is a little bit different. You say, just for simple math, let's say you have a customer who's got $100 weekly payment contractually due. So every week, as long as they're in the portfolio and active and haven't been charged off, every week is going to show $100 from Mary Smith, we'll call it. Well, if Mary's a little bit short in week one, and so she can only pay $40, that means we're deficient for that week. But if she pays an extra $20 for the next 3 weeks, then we're going to over collect for the next 3 weeks. And across that 4-week period, we would be at 100% relative to Mary Smith's account, right? So what that says is, this is why this becomes important, is because it helps us identify then the collection team apparently did what we asked them to do. They work with people, they give them a little bit of time to get caught up, as long as customers are acting in good faith and providing the verification or doing whatever it is we ask them to do, then we cooperate with them. And so while that customer would still look okay on a recency report, they're showing past due. They're going to inflate our delinquency. And if you have 10 of those customers in that situation, our delinquency, moves. Yet we don't want to penalize the collection team for doing that. If that's our approach, if we have a bend without breaking approach to collections, and we do accept partial payments and we do cooperate with people, then it stands to reason that we're going to have some delinquency spikes, right? And so I think the question becomes, how do we react to that? And I've met a lot of dealers over the years who really just look at delinquency, right? And I think it's problematic, because it just doesn't tell the whole story, especially if we're trying to cooperate and work with people. And it just takes a while to analyze. If you just try to get inside and do all the stuff that we just talked about to look at 10 customers and figure out what the status is, even though software is better now than it had been, it's still kind of, it still takes some work to really drill in and find out what's going on with those and determine whether the collection team is doing their job. But I think once the collection team, let's talk about a collection supervisor, a manager of a collection department, or an individual collector themselves. Like when they look at these numbers, once they get familiar with the thing, especially when their pay plan is tied to it, I find that what it does is it promotes more proactive collecting. Instead of waiting until the customer's past due, or heck, we don't catch them till Monday and they're 3 days past due, instead of waiting until they're on our past due list. If we work from a list that says, these are the customers that are contractually due on Tuesday, and let's say there are just 5 of them. When I come in on a Tuesday morning, these are the people. So I still have my past due list. Of course, I'm still working my past due list. But when I can start my day from, these are the customers that are due today, then maybe your practice is, or your approach in your business is, to reach out to them on the day that they're due. Maybe you don't reach out to them till 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the day that they're due. Whatever your practice is, but at least you know who they are. The reason that's important is if you see Joe Stevens pop up on the list, it's due Tuesday, I say, oh man, I probably should reach out to him now, because when I last talked to Joe Stevens, he was talking about a possible job change, right? So it's a reason for me to work it before it's a problem. Customers are more likely to answer my phone call today than they will when they're 6 days late. So if I can reach out to them and talk to them now, then that helps me to, work the accounts more proactively. And I find that when managers really settle into that and they understand this is kind of the thing, then it helps them to approach collections more proactively, and to kind of know that they're not going to get beat up by the dealer supervisor. We obviously want to have supervisors and collectors, and sometimes general managers, all compensated on this sort of approach to collections whenever, the thing is set up well in the system, or in the processes at the dealership, I should say. But the idea here is, once we all get on that same page, then we don't fear being penalized for working with a customer, especially in today's environment, right, Nathan? I mean, it's tough for a lot of customers out there. And so if we just try to take an iron fist approach to get your payment in here by 6 o'clock on Friday or else, then I think most of us could expect to have a lot of repos, on the lot come Monday. And so this is something that we really are trying to re-emphasize and to make materials available so that folks can capture this. Now, I can tell you from my experience, and as people speak up, if your system will do this, just be careful. Make sure you got the definition. If your software will produce a report that shows the customers that are contractually due in an upcoming period, like give you a list of all the customers and exactly what's due on their contract, irrespective of whether they're behind or paid ahead, I'm only aware of 3 software that will do that for us in the buy here, pay here sector now. One is IDMS. The other is, or the second one would be DealPack will do it. And I know DCS will do it. So if there are others out there that will do exactly the way that I described, please let me know.
AutoMaster will do it.
Yeah. Okay. AMS. Okay, good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So if AMS, then what that affords dealers the opportunity, especially if this can be auto scheduled so that it automatically spits out every Sunday night, for example, based on the contracts that are active. That's important. And that's another reason we want to do it on a weekly interval, is because we want to be working from fresh data. We want to know that, because if 3 accounts get charged off on Friday, we don't want them on the Sunday night report, right? We want that moves over to our inactive portfolio, and it won't be on this projected. In the case of IDMS, it's called a projected payment report or projected payment analysis report. So I think this becomes really important to have that kind of data available. And the workbook that I prepared, with a little help from ChatGPT, we took all this information and put it into a booklet that dealers can have. They can send a note to me, Jim at whitehatway.com, and we'll send them the little booklet that they can refer to. And if you're not on one of those DMS systems that I mentioned, then there's a method that you can use average payment, update your average payment method or your payment amount periodically, and it'll do the math. It'll get you close. We'd still prefer to have it contractually do, and I would love to have every DMS make this available for dealers for exactly this reason. But I think what happens is when you start to look at that, let's go ahead and drill into the thing about the 7%. So, as I was having this conversation with a dealer yesterday, I said, so could this be the reason that number is lower? And I said, yes. So I asked you to think about this. Like if we consistently run 7% deficient, doesn't make it to the bank in the 10-week period, then what would be the drivers on that? I've had fun in classrooms over the years, I'm speaking, talking about this subject, ask dealers in the room. And typically it takes a little bit. Somebody will say, well, what about just repos? And that's definitely one of them. Okay. So customer Mary Smith was supposed to pay 100, didn't. 3-4 weeks go on. We repossessed the car. But contractually speaking, every one of those weeks she was in our active portfolio. She was expected to pay. She ultimately charged off. She repossessed, charged off. So whatever that window of time is that 4 weeks? Is it 8 weeks? How long did we allow Mary to stay in our portfolio not paying what I would come to call a non-performing account? How long did Mary stay in the portfolio in a non-performing status before we charged it off? Because even if the customer's out for repo, still active, still in this report, okay? Even if the customer has been repossessed but not yet charged off, still active, still expecting a payment, still would like to see a resolution. So it's still in our portfolio. So it part of what happens here is, I think, from a balance sheet perspective, and the other reason I like this measurement is because it gives you, Nathan, as a dealer, some awareness around if my collection efficiency is falling off, I must have a number of contracts that are not performing. They're not paying as expected, which means I have a percentage of my portfolio that is kind of, sometimes we call it dead wood. It's inflating our balance sheet because it's on our active portfolio report, but it's not performing. And so this is why we like to shorten that cycle as much as possible. We definitely, White Hat Way, we condone a bend without breaking, work with customers. And then once you get to the point where it has to be, the relationship has to end and we have to repossess and charge off whatever, we just want to see that cycle be as short as possible. And part of the way we help that become short is just keeping in contact with customers and being proactive and not letting a delinquency problem drag out. Let's not let a repo management process drag out and have it take too long to cure. We just want to move through those and get them off of the balance sheet as quickly as possible. Because when you walk in on a Monday morning or the 1st of October, Nathan, we want you to be able to run a report that says this portfolio is pretty clean. These are real performing assets. For the most part, you're always going to have a few in there, right? But when you see that number run from 93% to 89%, it says, whoa, I got some contracts in there that aren't paying as expected. So I got to go identify that. And delinquency won't always tell the whole story. So I've shared one of the two drivers, and obviously the repossession charge off. Mary Smith was supposed to pay and didn't. The other one is deferrals. And this is where we got to be watchful, because it's when we talk about gaping holes where we're vulnerable as dealers, is when we authorize somebody on the team to defer payments, like contractually go into the software and actually move the payments. So every system calls it something different. I mean, I've heard them called due date changes, or, there's any number of things that you can do a full-on modification, amendment, rewrite. Most people don't do a lot of that. But there are systems that afford the ability to just take a payment and push it out 8 weeks, or push it to the end of the contract. And if we grant people on our team the authority to do that, then this can drive the other piece. And I think this is the part that, so now we would look at that and say, well, our delinquency looks fine. Our recency looks okay. Yet the money's not in the bank, apparently, right? Because this is the part that we begin to identify is when we're deferring payments. It's like, yeah, the contract's still there, still active, and the account shows to be in good standing. Why? Because we deferred the payment, we pushed the payment back, but we would be feeling it here. Our bank deposits would be suffering because this customer was supposed to pay, and we agreed to defer the payment. And so we can feel that in our bank deposit. This is why it becomes so important for us to identify, this deficiency number and say, where is, so when I call it leakage, I'm just saying it's really just non-performing assets. It's dead wood in our portfolio. Customers not paying as expected. And so it becomes, a problem in that way. So I think this is the part, and I'm going to take this off the screen for just a minute. I'm having a little trouble running 2 screens, but if I've got the document that I can share that we worked up, the little booklet that we can walk through the particulars, but I think we covered most of the pieces that I really wanted to have a chance to express. So, Ken, I know a lot of this information was new to you, but I'd be interested in your perspective, your thoughts on what we presented there.
I guess what I'm just thinking about is, one of the things is, like you said, large payment that's taken out, right? Like how, so what if what if a customer makes a large payment? Like they got, I don't know, like, they sold some stuff, and now they want to pay $1,000, which doesn't happen normally. But how does a dealer go in and include that into that, or does it take
the
it?
cutoff
Do they
we
take
use
it
is
out as well?
The number we use is $1,000. That's what we would recommend in dealers. And even though payments are a little higher than they were 10 years ago, I think 1,000 is still a good number. So it's going to allow, when a customer has a $450 payment, they were past due, and they came in, they catch up this month, they pay $900. We're fine. They're just catching up from payments in the past. It can stay in the mix. We're really just trying to identify those payments that are of a significant size, so that customer sold something, right? In your example, if they came in and paid $3,000, I would say we're going to credit back. I didn't show you in the math in there, but we're going to credit back. Customer pays $3,000. They were past due $500, and they contractually were due for another $300 in this window. So we're going to credit that. We're going to give credit for the $800 that was banked as expected. But the extra money, we want to filter out, because again, we're just trying to measure, how do we do relative to the money that we expected? Okay. So that's what this whole thing is trying to measure. So we just want to filter out those large payments. So anything else on that?
Yeah, I'm just, the other thing I was thinking is, let's say a dealer, because I've been talking to some dealers, and, like I told Nathan in one of our conversations, that some of these dealers don't even know their numbers, right?
Yeah, sure.
They're not even familiar with that. So what is the significance of, let's say the 90% or 95%, like what's the significance of that for a dealer? Like, why would they want to track that? Or why is that even important for them, right?
Well, I'll let Nathan answer that. He's been doing it. Why is it important to you, Nathan?
So for a couple of reasons, right? So the first is, I want to be able to know from week to week what my expected cash flow is going to be, so that I can budget. So I can go out and say, yes, I can afford to make this repair this week, or no, I need to push that recon to next week. I can afford to buy 5 cars this week. No, I can't. I can only afford to buy 3. So it allows you to budget into the future. That's probably the biggest. The second is, and this kind of is evaluating the overall health of your portfolio. Like if I keep growing and building this, right, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, am I going to be able to add an employee 6 months down the road or not? Can I expect that? Because, buy here, pay here, things don't show themselves for several months, right? So you could think you're doing a great job, and then it just the deficiency in whatever policy or operational mistake you might make, which we all do, really compounds over time, and you don't get to see that out into the future. So it allows you to plan not just this month or this week, but also if I'm going to grow my portfolio to 300 accounts from 100 accounts, what's that going to look like? And am I able to, are our policies robust enough? Is our bend, don't break rules effective enough in bringing real money in to allow me to grow? And then, you also will know, it'll impact repossessions. It'll impact how your lending relationships are going to look. Can I continue with this, line of credit and grow that into the future? Will I have enough cash coming in for the debt that I'm taking on if I continue to add to this line of credit? So it's a planning tool. It's a policy tool. And I looked at those numbers Jim put up, and I'll tell you, you could see patterns in the numbers. Like you can see that last week of the month, that guy 3 months in a row was collecting over 100% in the last week. Yeah. Right. So that does two things. Number one, am I going to sweat it this week if I'm at an 85%? No, because the pattern is, you got week 132. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you look, there was a date on there. That was the last week of the month. Okay. Right. So weekends 8/31. So he collected 117%, right? Next week out of the gate, he's at 79, right? Do I panic over the 79? Well, let's play it out. Okay, 79, 93, 87. All right, last week of the month again, we're at 105. Right. So I think you can spot trends. You can also know oh gosh, I'm in the third week. I'm panicky. Do I have enough money to cover payroll? Because that's coming this week. Oh, probably not. Not saying for certain, but probably not. I'm probably going to collect, 105, 100 and whatever percent of what I'm expected to. So it gives you the ability to really plan out your cash flow as you go from week to week and month to month.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect, Nathan. That's several of the dealers that I've been working with, the biggest struggle has been, cash flow, right? And you're exactly right. I mean, without these numbers, without this data, it's difficult to plan. And what's been happening with some of these dealers is that they're not looking at these numbers. And so they're overspending what's actually being collected, and so, and then they're wondering, I can't pay my payroll. What am I going to do? Right. And so, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it's true, because this is a big chunk of the dollars. And again, there's money that you could go look on the other screen. There are monies that come in beyond what we have here because we're filtering out some dollars. They're not big. If you add them up, across 10 weeks, it's not big. But to Nathan's point, if you're this dealer right here, you could look across the last 6 weeks or so, and you can see, you guys can't see the average there. I guess I can't even see it the way I've got this thing set up, but it's an average of 46 grand across those weeks. So now a dealer can know with some degree of certainty, but a little bit above or a little bit below that, but you can know that that's about what we're collecting, and hopefully that number's growing. But we can say that, if I collect 93%, if I forecast 93% off of this, or whatever my projections are, then it gives me some certainty about planning, to Nathan's point. And I love that part. I don't think about that part as much, but you're absolutely right. It does give you the ability to do that. And one thing, I opened this again because I wanted to quickly show everybody, these numbers in blue are the last week of each last week of each month. That's because it drives bonuses on the team. Okay. So that's how we've got it all set up. The 10-week average at the last week of each month. So 92.9, 93.3 for those not seeing the screen. I'm going back to the end of each month. 89.8 definitely was short that month. 91.3, 92.6, 93.9, 93.5. You get the idea. It's like it's pretty consistently in that range. And so it gives dealers some degree of confidence knowing where to be. And it also allows a dealer to sleep better at night when there's a little bit of a delinquency spike. To Nathan's point, right? It's like you just know that, it's if my team is doing what we've asked them to do. And the other thing I want to point out, I didn't say anything about it earlier, but if the goal is to collect 96%, we can change that number on this calculation. But if the goal would be to collect 96%, then that tells the team, hey, here's what we got to collect this week. If you want you to get your bonus, to 96%, here's what's got to be collected this particular week to get us back to that level. And so it's helpful in that way. And it helps help dealers and their team to start to differentiate, between, what's possible and what we can do there. But I'm going to stop share that. I'm going to just quickly give a rundown. We've covered most of the points, but I do want to share the document that people can ask for. We've got that ready to release, and it's going to take you through the high points in pretty good detail of just about what we covered here. And so I think it'll be useful for folks to be able to have an understanding what's here. It's instruction for both those systems that have the software that will do the projection. It's what is it? Why does it matter? This whole 2-screen thing is just not working for me in our StreamYard platform. And then the step-by-step, how to track it. Then number 4, common causes of the inefficiency or deficiency. And then when software can't generate the schedules, right? How to solve that one. And then some best practices and kind of some quick reference for how it works, and then some takeaways. So this is this is available. We can share this with dealers who, want to step into this sort of methodology. But I would say one of the reasons that we continue to come back to this particular approach is that this approach, you can see more than most anything else we do, would allow us to measure and even reward a team that is doing the job that Nathan described and that I have recommended, which is we're going to work with people, and they're not all going to pay every penny on time every time. And if we will monitor that on a longer range basis and recognize that the team is doing the job, are they getting the money in the bank? Yes or no? That's really, or yes or no? Are we getting the money in the bank? Because I feel like that's what this really measures, is how well we're banking the dollars. And then it helps us know, okay, so which ones aren't we banking? When we go back and look at that 7%, why are we missing that money? And so, we want to cooperate with people, but you heard me say, when it comes time by policy to have to end the business relationship, whether that means repossession or whatever, then we need to just go ahead and charge it off. Same thing, dealer asked me yesterday, well, what about these accounts where, it's wrecked and we're waiting on an insurance check? You can charge it off. I mean, the check's still going to come. You go create a system for somebody else, but as long as it sits there in the active portfolio, it's going to keep generating a contractually expected payment, and it's going to hurt your team's percentage because that you've already decided not to pursue any more payments. You could charge it off, and when the check comes, you apply it toward the charge-off balance. So that's just practices, right? This is just, but the more we can shorten those practices, then I think what we're really, at the end of the day, as an advisor for dealers, I don't want to see dealers have an inflated balance sheet. I don't want you, because that can be dangerous. We can find ourselves in a position where suddenly we're charging off more than we realize. And it can, if you're with a lender, it can cause borrowing based problems that you weren't ready for. And so we just don't like to see dealers carrying that dead wood. And so this is because it can be problematic. And this, even if you don't have a line of credit, it's going to give you a false sense of where you're at, and that's not how we want to manage. So I'm glad you guys could join at the last minute. I appreciate your questions and your input. I think this is really important stuff, and I think dealers just continue to kind of pay attention to that part, and we can have a chance to just see kind of where it leads. But any closing thoughts from you, Nathan, before we wrap up?
No, I think we've given everyone something to think about that I think is, obviously I agree to it. I think it's helped me as I grow and plan and prepare and make decisions. Like, I couldn't do it without it.
Well,
so that's how I view it.
Good. Wow. Ken, what about you? Any thoughts, questions before we go?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, to the dealer that's kind of struggling right now, that, this is, looking at the deficiency is one way that you can really, you might not want to look at it, right? I mean, they don't, dealer that's struggling sometimes they don't want to see what the problem is because they're in that, that fear mode. Like, if they see it, they're like, oh man, yeah, it really does. It really is bad. I'm just thinking about some of these dealers that have, gone, like got into trouble, like, one, like a large dealer recently that we kind of been seeing all over Facebook, that's gotten into trouble, and, it's like, what is a dealer to do, right? When he's seeing that there's a pattern of delinquencies, going down, or like the percentage is going down, right? By tracking these numbers, he might be able to do something about that early on. Yeah. Or like what you said, it's possible that, it could be a covenant issue, and then, what do they do, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, and that's obviously a major warning sign. If it's a covenant problem and they don't feel like they can charge it off, then that's a recipe for that's going to get bad. And so
that's going to get really bad.
Yeah. Call me and I'll call Ken and we'll find out. We'll figure out a way to help solve the problem. But, no, that's definitely
a great idea. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you guys making time to be part of the conversation today. I think we'll wind it down there, but we just always want to make sure we this small stuff with the fingertips. So if you guys want to we'll be able to chat for just a minute before you get back to your stuff. Stand by just a bit.